Those specific contracts was reported to OUTA back in 2018 by 3 brave whistleblowers that came to our offices and told us about irregularities that happened on, several tenders that were awarded at that time. People that were implicated in those reports are still employed there, while the whistleblowers that came to see us back in 2018 are still without jobs because they were fired because they blew the whistle. And only 2.5 years later, we got the actual documents.
2.5 years.
2.5 years. So everything stood still for 2.5 years.
My goodness.
But now we know why they didn't want to give us that information. And what we found there was that the same people, the same company, they was awarded 3 back-to-back tenders for the same thing for a period of 3 to 4 years. And that company and those individuals, they pocketed 300 million rand from Services SETA.
300 million rand for...
Yeah, guys, so this story is actually interesting and intriguing to me as well. I remember earlier this year, prior to the GNU, I was actually following a story where the EFF was actually, in a way, blasting the ANC for the failure it had on the, South African students in terms of NSFAS, and how it had delayed payment of NSFAS, and how there should be sort of like a transformation of the NSFAS, you see, at that time. And I remember then, I actually saw this story about this OUTA, this organization for, it's an organization set up to check abuses on tax. And I was actually following the story where OUTA and the higher education minister at that time, Blade Nzimande, actually were in scuffle. But I really didn't understand what was going on at the time because with NSFAS, my research on NSFAS was just still brewing. But now this interview with the boss of OUTA, that's Organization on Doing Tax Abuse, then really brings a lot of things to the fore. And how, whistleblowers is becoming a thing now in South Africa. There was whistleblowing in the case against Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi that actually gave DA an edge against, in terms of the case that is trying to push for, to get the documents. It argues that it's within the confines of the Gauteng premier at the moment, and that case is still brewing. Now also in this case with the NSFAS and OUTA's investigation into the corruption that actually occurred in the education department, higher education ministry, whistleblowers actually played a role here and actually exposed a lot of shocking details, which we will hear in this interview. And I'll be back for some really interesting analysis that goes deeper into the case that actually ended up in Blade Nzimande trying to sue OUTA. This now OUTA to the court for actually defaming its name, but yet OUTA still remains resilient in its push for the fact that there was corruption in the higher education ministry and actually has a lot of documents to back that up.
So, Rudy, let's go back to when did this investigation, how did it start into the Services SETA? What did you find out? And let's take it from there.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. This Werksman's report that was discussed by the Portfolio Committee last week with the leadership of Services SETA, Werksman's investigated a few contracts, and those specific...
Why did they investigate? Who instructed them to investigate?
Let me go back into history somehow, and I'll tell you how it came about. Now, those specific contracts that were looked into by Werksman's was reported to OUTA back in 2018 by 3 brave whistleblowers that came to our offices and told us about irregularities and procurement irregularities that happened on several tenders that were awarded at that time. What we did then as OUTA is we launched a PIA application. We requested the access to this information. Services SETA denied us the access. We had to go to court, and only 2.5 years later, we got the actual documents.
2.5 years.
2.5 years. So everything stood still for 2.5 years.
My goodness. And this is stuff that we should know as the public. When we want information about how our money is spent, this is not stuff that you should expect to fight for. If a government department is being run properly and transparently, they should say, sure, here's the information that you're looking for. It's not a secret. We weren't asking for trade secrets. Eh?
Absolutely. You're 100% correct. And that information is all about, the evaluation processes, who were the tenders, who were the bidders, who was successful, what happened during the evaluation process. But now with the Werksman's report out...
But tell us what you found out then.
Yeah, but now we know why they didn't want to give us that information. But let's go back to the 2.5 years that we had to wait. Only then we could start to dig deep into those tenders. And we found the first one that we looked at was the Grace and Reed tender, where this service provider had to provide biometrics and a monitoring system for Services SETA. Services SETA paid 166 million rand for that.
166 million rand.
And I think the mind-blowing thing about that is that Werksmans found that they could never see that equipment was delivered to Services SETA.
Wow.
So, and the next two contracts that we investigated was all about branding and printing services. And what we found there was that the same people, the same company, they was awarded 3 back-to-back tenders for the same thing for a period of 3 to 4 years. And that company and those individuals, they pocketed 300 million rand from Services SETA.
300 million rand for printing and branding exercises over a number of years.
Correct. And new investigations that we are conducting, we see where and on what they spend that money. Vehicles, properties, the typical, you have got a lot of money, so I must get rid of it, spend it on property, spend it on luxury.
Are these
vehicles.
the service providers who got this money? So recently we've started to uncover that this money wasn't to run the business, but it went into buying luxury goods and homes and properties and cars for...
Yeah, only a very small percentage went back into
the business,
as capital for the business.
The typical picture of corruption. So in those tenders, what was it? Marked up, inflated pricing?
It was heavily inflated. We found that some of the products were marked up by 8,000%.
Wow!
And
for T-shirts
and during that time, the oversight on those contracts should have been done by the board, by the chairperson of the board, by the CEO, by the CFO, but they just all signed off on the evaluation process as well as on the approval for payment. Mr. Mahambi, Mr. Nongogo, Mr. Matsebe, they should have.
So who's Mr. Mahambi? Was he the chairperson?
He was the chairperson of the Accounting Authority, currently the chairperson of the Sunral Board for a second term.
So this is the same Mahambi who's the chairperson of Sanral?
That's correct. Yes.
Themba Mahambi?
That is correct.
Wow. So, my goodness. And there we're having to uncover things like board overreach and serious conduct at Sanral. So you say, when you start joining the dots here, and this Themba Mahambi was appointed by Bladen Zamandi, wasn't he, at Sanral and at Services?
Correct. Mr. Mahambi came, through the services or the SETA sector. He was previously the administrator of Construction SETA, then the chairperson of the Accounting Authority of Services SETA. And when Minister Nzimande was moved to be the Minister of Transport by former President Zuma, he immediately appointed Mr. Mahambi as the chairperson of Sunral in 2018 or 17. And his appointment was renewed by Minister Fikile Mbalula recently.
Sure, and Sanral has a lot of money to spend as well. So let's get back to the Services SETA thing. So you say the CEO, CFO, chairperson, everybody's looking away while these grossly overpriced tenders, manipulation, and spending is taking place. It takes us years to get this information. So that's the first red flag, is when a department doesn't want to share with us information, which we rightly are entitled to because we are the citizens, we pay the taxes. We start smelling a rat. But you never let go. So you kept digging and digging. And this, I think, is one of the successes of OUTA is its resilience to just stay the course, because as over time, the digital fingerprints and the evidence and the joining of the dots gets bigger and bigger, and the picture gets painted more clearly. So what happened after that?
What we basically did, I think, a bit unconventional. Instead of looking at the contracts themselves, in depth, we started to follow the service providers, where they went, where did they go, because we saw the trend with this same company, the same individuals being appointed 3 times in a row to do the same work for Services SETA. And we followed them and their business associates And we could see that they were appointed at other SETAs as well. And later on, when Mr. Andile Nongogo went to NSFAS, the same group of people were also appointed at NSFAS.
NSFAS, this is the National Students' AIDS Finance Scheme.
That's correct. And
that's been in the news for a lot the last couple of years.
For all the wrong reasons, yes.
Yeah. And so Andile Nongogo was appointed there as the CEO by Blade Nzimande.
As well, yeah.
Again, okay.
And these service providers basically followed him.
Okay. So this network just grows, and it would seem, as you were saying, this network's providing similar services to other SETAs. Wow. Okay.
So I think one thing that I just want to mention is that the problem that we are sitting with, one of the biggest problems, is transparency from the services or from the SETA side or from institutions reporting to the Department of Higher Education. Mm-hmm. We have launched a lot of, written a lot of letters and asked for information. And then we have to go on to a PIA application. And then we have to go on to an internal appeal. And most of those PIA requests ended up with the information regulator. So it is taking us, a lot of time, a year or more, just to get the information.
Yeah. So there, really, we see it so often in government is that's where you start to realize there's something untoward. We've always said transparency is the enemy of corruption. And when a department does as much as it can to not be transparent about spending, the red flags start being raised. And they do everything they can not to give us the information. They slow us down, but we're not going away. And this picture got so big that eventually, I think Andile Nongogo was fired from NSFAS.
Correct. And if we had this information and if there was action taken on this information, on our reports, on the Werksmans reports, the two reports from Werksmans, the one on Services SETA, the one on NSFAS, if it was acted on earlier and quicker, the problem would not have been, escalating the way it was. One thing that I want to add there is that every time when we looked at different irregularities at different institutions reporting to higher education, and we give out our reports, it is being doubted by the institution. And then they will appoint a new firm to look into our work. And 99% of the time, they came up with the same results and findings. And only then they start to act. What we saw at Services SETA, and that is one of the reasons why they were grilled in Parliament last week, is because 18 months, they're sitting on that report now. 18 months.
18 months ago, they got a Worksman's report that was extremely damning around the gross maladministration, irregularities, potential corruption happening in Services SETA. The management, the board, and everyone sit on that for 18 months and do nothing. And yet there's compelling evidence in there that should have seen, for instance, the CFO held accountable as far as we're concerned.
Yes, absolutely. And one thing that's interesting is that we've talked about the previous board, or let's call it the previous administration at Services SETA under Mohammed. Yeah. The new administration, the new board under Mr. Stephen de Vries, I think they are just as guilty as the previous administration or the previous leadership, because they had all the evidence, they had all the reports, they had all the findings, they had the recommendations, but they sat on it, they did nothing, and people that were implicated in those reports are still employed there, while the whistleblowers that came to see us back in 2018 are still without jobs because they were fired because they blew the whistle.
My God. So that's the sick situation that happens. The good people get fired and the bad people stay on. And the inaction, the lack of consequences, the lack of holding people to account by the very people in positions of authority just continues to linger on and on. And I think
brilliant, guys. So I don't know if it was a kind of like a shocking interview in a way. A lot of things going on there. And, right now, I think Blade Nzimande, I think he's from the ANC. He's now the Minister of Innovation, I think, and now we have a new Minister of Higher Education. But most of these issues that actually still rocked the department at the time are still being fought upon by OUTA. And you could hear from the interview how he actually exposes how, all the, misappropriations in terms of tenders that were actually going on in the ministry. And that led to the swindle swindling of close to 300 million. So I'll just go through a really interesting report from the Daily Maverick that breaks down the whole issue with, the fraud that actually took place in the Ministry of Higher Education that led to the firing of whistleblowers and firing of some, chairman, I think, or some leader at the board of NSFAS. So it argues here that Blade Nzimande's name loomed large in a new report by the Organization on Doing Tax Abuse, OUTA, which allegedly links the Minister of Higher Education, then Minister of Higher Education, and Chairman of National Student Financial Aid Scheme, NSFAS, Alex Kosa, and others to rampant corruption in tender procurement for higher education. All right. So a whistleblower, OUTA actually said that a whistleblower shared 2 recordings, allegedly of talks between Kosa and Tula Ntumba, and also an unnamed third party in which they discussed about kickbacks, mismanagement, and political meddling in NSFAS, which then brought the scheme NSFAS to its knees. You know, NSFAS was actually grilled in Parliament recently. I think it was 3 weeks ago. I'm going to make a video on that where one of the DA ministers was actually, really going hot on that NSFAS representative on the issue of NSFAS in the Northern Cape. I think I'll be making a video on that soon. But they argues that, OUTA then released the recordings and then the transcripts of the recordings, as well as a detailed 51-page report on the alleged corruption in which Kosa and this unnamed supplier, and also Ntumba, who here is argued that is the husband of Shegofatso Ntumba, who is the director in CoinVest, which was one of the 4 service providers appointed to disburse payments to students. So anyway, it argues that OUTA released the recordings, the transcripts of the recordings, as well as a detailed 51-page report on the alleged corruption in which Kosa, an unnamed supplier, and also this Ntumba actually discussed corruption investigations and alleged kickbacks and for tenders and for favors and also for protection, in double quotes. So what was it really at the center of this rot of the NSFAS? Because one of the reasons I'm really passionate about this NSFAS is my passion for education, really. I actually really love to see an educated populace. Most of the time I spent in the Nordic states, I saw, the power of education in grooming a populace. And if a populace is well educated, you see, democracy really thrives, okay? Because now you don't have people just voting for the sake of voting, but people make informed decisions before they vote. And then the result would then have to be dependent on the higher powers, on how rigged or unrigged the election is. But at the level of the populace, that education is key. And I really have been really passionate about this whole NSFAS issue in helping a lot of South Africans get, bursaries and support to be able to get educated. But then we see this massive corruption. So where did this whole rot of the NSFAS system, where did this whole corruption of the NSFAS system begin? The report says that in June 2022, NSFAS appointed 4 service providers with links to the government, and they were CoinVest Africa Limited. CoinVest is actually here said in this report to be, the director of CoinVest is the husband of Ntumba, which this report actually speaks of. This report released by OUTA. Okay, so CoinVest Limited, Tenet Technology Limited, Egiza Holdings Limited, and then Narako Corporations Limited. You see, so these 4 service providers were appointed by NSFAS to carry out, the tasks of NSFAS. It says subsequently, NSFAS's payment system to students all but collapsed, according to OUTA. OUTA had warned at the time that awarding the tenders to these service providers to disburse direct payments to students would cause problems with the payment. All right, so OUTA was actually ahead of the time in this whole thing and actually warned that, I don't know what it saw was the problem with these service providers, but it actually claimed that the disbursal of direct payments to students from these service providers would be a problem. He said OUTA also published several reports exposing how the funds were being mismanaged and that the role of the former NSFAS CEO Andile Nongogo is actually, in an alleged corruption. Now, Nzimande's name was actually said to be at the center of the corruption allegations, and he said that the report says here that it was he who appointed both Nongogo as CEO of NSFAS and then Kosa as the chairman of the NSFAS board, all right? Nzimande then remains associated, according to this report, with the SA Communist Party, SACP, an organization which he served for 24 years as general secretary. And if you remember the last video, Rob Hersov was actually, I think it was this minister, Nzimande, Nzimande, on how he claims to be an entrepreneur, but then he's a member of the Communist Party, and how that dichotomy doesn't really work out at the level of ideology. But anyway, it says that Blade Nzimande served as Minister of Higher Education from 11th of May 2009 to 17th of October 2017, and also then as Minister of Transport from February 2018 until he was reappointed to the Higher Education Ministry in May 2019. All right. Now it says that Kosa also became a non-executive member of the South African Civil Aviation Authority (SACAA) board on the 1st of April 2018. Now, the same year, Nzimande, actually, who was then the Minister of Transport, appointed Kosa to be chairperson of SACAA's board. In December 2020, Nzimande, then the Minister of Higher Education, then installed Kosa as chairperson of the NSFAS. So he's been really close with this Kosa. Okay, Nzimande has actually been close to this Kosa. They've been really moving closely, you see, and for me, one of the things about this appointment is really interesting in that, I remember one of the videos I made where Rob Hersov spoke about how the ANC is actually, the word he used was kind of like a patronage system where ministers are actually giving patronage, so to speak, for their efforts in helping build the party, rather than probably appointment based on experience or professionalism or what fits best into that position. And so it's really interesting that one minister can be Minister of Transport today in this regime, and the next regime can be Minister of Education, and the next one he can be Minister of Health. Is really for me, I really think it's problematic. But anyway, so now it goes into the costs of padding. I think this is about padding the budget, so to speak, for this contract. So he said Ntumba and Associates Consulting is the consulting of, I think, Ntumba, and is also the panel of the NSFAS financial management companies, all right? Now, there was also Star, Sign, and Print, of which Shegofatso Ntumba is a director, right? It's this Star, Sign, and Print was awarded 39.7 million rand tender by SETA for printing and branding promotional items. All right. Now, the company, it argues here in this report that the company padded the costs massively. According to OUTA's investigation, none of the invoiced prices were questioned by Nongogo, who authorized payment for items or services such as the following. There was 93,579 rand for 20 branded t-shirts, which consist of 4,679 rand each. There was 264,340 rand for 6 branded umbrellas. There was 187,600 rand for video services for one-day event. There was, let me go there again. It says there was 186,600 rand for video services for a one-day event. Interesting. It says also that there was 58,800 rand for 60 coasters. There was 36,300 rand to design a letterhead. There was 36,300 to redesign a payment advice form. There was 668,200 to print 100 copies of SETA annual performance plan. There was 58,400 to photography services at a one-day event. And there was also 302,010 rand for a tender box of vinyl branding. Yeah, so these are really crazy amounts to actually, be spoken of and actually identified by this OUTA report that actually detailed, what really went down at the ministry at the time of, that handled the whole problem with NSFAS, to which many, ministers, many parties, especially the likes of the EFF, were really angry at the ANC for the corruption that actually went there. But now we're in the GNU era. We really don't understand how those things will play out, and it's quite unfortunate anyway how these things go. It then speaks about, the South African Communist Party, the response from the South African Communist Party on this whole matter. It says that South African Communist Party spokesperson Alex Mashilo told Daily Maverick that the SACP has never and will never approach anyone to seek funding support illegitimately. Now, this is him speaking. That's Alex Mashilo. He says, "We will not allow anyone to engage in shenanigans and to try to co-opt the name of our party into those shenanigans. We stand firm in our stance against corruption. We saw the transcripts of the recordings by the third party from OUTA, and we remain firm in what we have said. Now, it argues here that the Department of Higher Education then tweeted in a lumbering response from Nzimande, stating that it noted with serious concerns the allegations leveled against him and that the minister wishes to reject the malicious allegations contained in the leaked out OUTA report and further reassures the public that he never used any money from any department entities for the purpose of funding the South African Communist Party. So it appeared that in this report, there were allegations that most of all that money that was actually, siphoned from the NSFAS whole system was directed towards the South African Communist Party. This is one of the transcript recordings from the leaked tapes released by OUTA. So it says that the minister views the allegations as reckless and largely based on gossip, and they are intended to determine a smooth start to the 2024 academic year. All right. So this is the retort from Blade Nzimande, then Higher Education Minister. It then says that Nzimande reaffirmed that he and his department's commitment to clean the government within the department was actually a goal. Then there was also another report by the spokesperson of NSFAS at the time. He said, this is now the NSFAS, Ishmael Minisi speaking. He said that there's absolutely nothing wrong that the leadership of NSFAS has done. They have not received any money from anyone, and it has been alleged that there has been such. There's no money that the chairperson has received for his personal gain, nor the minister, nor the South African Communist Party. So these are all retortions. But anyway, the investigations manager, as we heard from this video you just watched now, his name is Rudy Heineck, his OUTA's investigations manager. He actually said that it is unethical, highly irregular, and against all the principles of good governance for the chairperson of the board to meet with service providers and ask for their input on board decisions. Why was it even necessary for COSA to meet these people and to update them on internal matters and request for their input for the way forward? So these are kind of like the two sides of the investigation going forward. So this spokesperson from OUTA, Heineck, then says, he said that the Worksman's report vindicated OUTA's findings on Nongogo's involvement with the awarding of tenders to co-invest Izaga, Noraco, and Tenet Technology, all right? He says that OUTA is satisfied with the outcome of Workman's investigation, and that while COSA, on the advice of Ntumba, appointed by Worksman in the mistaken belief that they would be able to control the firm and influence the outcome of the investigation, that plan definitely backfired, says this Heinecker. So then, the report goes then to say that while NSFAS acted on Workman's recommendation that Nongogo should be removed as the CEO, it remains unclear why the 4 service providers haven't been removed yet, especially since thousands of students countrywide are still waiting for allowances and tuition fees for last year to be paid, and that it is clear for everyone to see that the service providers are not capable of doing their job. And to date, OUTA understands that the service providers have not received any notification of any cancellation. All right, so that's how far the problem was at the time. It said that, previously, OUTA had shared these recordings and investigation report with authorities and is currently writing to President Cyril Ramaphosa requesting, as at that time, Nzimande should be removed from the cabinet and also Kusa to be removed as chairman of NSFAS. So these were actually the things that actually happened prior to the inauguration of the government of national unity. And it actually speaks to how the kind of rot we have in the higher education ministry, because I think it's quite unfair that, the funds for students can actually be tampered with. There was also this issue in Kenya where President Ruto is actually going through a lot now in Kenya, with his deputy vice president, Gachagua is his name, actually is going through an impeachment at the moment, and there's actually now a new vice president. But then there was also many issues around government ministers, where there was one minister that actually tampered with the funds that were designed for student scholarships, and it actually landed Kenya in a really highly, controversial global negative portrayal, where most of the students now in their respective countries where they were supposed to be schooling with their scholarships had no money sent, and they had actually already gone abroad to these countries, which then sparked a really high, dangerous immigration problem that then boils down to corruption as a result of the tampering of the funds for students. And so I think it's quite unfortunate that, if corruption wants to go on, it can go on. Probably this is not the right thing to say, but we hope that corruption does not, stifle the possibility or potential for students, especially in Africa, to be able to be educated, because education now, we see that is the key, the pace at which different changes in technology are going forward with the emergence of AI and other technologies are currently, thumping faster than even humans can catch up. So you don't want to tamper with the students' education and their potential. We know that South Africa is suffering from a 33.3% unemployment rate. And, one that the likes of, the Bosa boss, Musi Maimane, speaks about how that South African students are not just unemployed, but they're unemployable because of the skills they have do not match the current needs of society, our technological society, as we are actually seeing at the moment. And so it's quite unfortunate that this whole thing goes on in the Department of Higher Education, and we're really hoping that probably there can be some changes in all that going forward in the Government of National Unity. But I don't know, what do you guys think about this whole report? Share your thoughts in the comments.